Welcome to the shadowed edge of America's wild heart, where the beauty of nature masks a terror so deep it claws at your soul. This is Deadly Secrets of America's National Forests, a journey into the blood-soaked mysteries that stain the pristine trails of our country's most cherished parks. Tonight, you'll hear 3 true tales of vanishings, stories so drenched in dread and carnage that they'll haunt your dreams and make you question every rustle in the trees. These aren't campfire legends spun to spook the kids. These are real events, ripped from the dark underbelly of the wilderness, where people step into the woods and never step out. Picture it: the towering pines whispering secrets, the wind carrying the stench of death, and the ground itself swallowing screams whole. By the time we're done, you'll never look at a national park the same way again. But first, I want you to dig into your own fears. What terrifies you most about the American wilderness? Is it the thought of getting lost in endless trees with no one to hear your cries? The idea of a predator, man or beast, watching from the shadows? Or maybe it's the eerie silence that hides something unspeakable. Drop your deepest fears in the comments below, and if you've ever felt the woods turn against you, share that story too. Now, lock your doors, dim the lights, and brace yourself. We're heading into the forests where the missing don't come back, and what finds them leaves nothing but blood. Story 1. Yosemite, The Vanishing of Sarah Johnson. Yosemite National Park unfurled before Sarah Johnson like a siren's song, its towering cliffs and shimmering waterfalls beckoning her into the wild. It was June 15th, 2010, a day when the park pulsed with life. Wildflowers splashed color across the meadows, rivers roared with melted snow, and the sky stretched endlessly above, a pristine blue canvas. For Sarah, a 25-year-old graphic designer from San Francisco, Yosemite wasn't just a destination, it was a sanctuary. She'd hiked the Mist Trail more times than she could count, its steep, misty steps a familiar gauntlet that always rewarded her with breathtaking vistas. This time, though, she craved something more, a solo adventure to capture the rare Sierra columbine in bloom, a flower as elusive as it was beautiful. Sarah had prepared with the precision of a seasoned hiker. Her backpack held essentials: a lightweight tent, a sleeping bag, energy bars, a water filter, a first aid kit, and her Canon camera, her most treasured companion. She'd spent the previous night packing, double-checking every item, her excitement bubbling over as she imagined the shots she'd take. Her roommate, Jen, had teased her as she laced up her boots that morning. "Don't get lost in those mountains, okay? And watch out for bears." Sarah had laughed, brushing off the warning. Bears were a risk, sure, but she knew how to handle them. Make noise, carry spray, stay alert. She was ready. The drive to Yosemite was a blur of winding roads and towering pines, the air growing crisper as she climbed into the mountains. At the trailhead, she signed the register: Sarah Johnson, Mist Trail, return by sunset, a routine precaution. The parking lot buzzed with activity. Families posing for photos, friends adjusting gear, and a handful of solo hikers like her, all drawn by the park's primal allure. She hoisted her pack, the weight settling comfortably on her shoulders, and set off, her boots crunching against the gravel. The first mile was a gentle warm-up, a meadow path lined with lupins and buttercups. The sun kissed her skin, and the forest hummed with life. Birds trilled, squirrels darted, and a breeze rustled the leaves. She paused to photograph a cluster of purple flowers, adjusting her lens to catch the light just right. It was perfect, almost too perfect, like the park was lulling her into a false sense of security. As she pressed deeper, the crowds thinned. Families stopped at the footbridge, content with a distant view of vernal fall, while the serious hikers pushed upward. By the time she reached the Mist Trail's slick granite steps, she was alone, the roar of the falls drowning out the world. Mist coated her face, cool and refreshing, as she gripped the railing and climbed. Each step tested her stamina, but she relished it, her breath syncing with the rhythm of her ascent. At the top, she dropped onto a flat rock, gulping water and gazing out at the valley below. Half Dome loomed in the distance, a silent giant against the sky. She snapped a few photos, but her real prize lay ahead. The columbines, rumored to bloom along a lesser-known spur trail. It was a detour, but the sun was high, and her legs felt strong. She found the path easily, a narrow ribbon winding through a grove of ponderosa pines, the air cooler, the light softer. The forest grew quieter as she walked, the birdsong fading into an eerie stillness. She brushed off the unease, focusing on her hunt. Then she saw it, a flash of white among the ferns. Kneeling, she framed the columbine in her lens, its delicate petals glowing like tiny lanterns. She clicked the shutter, lost in the moment, until a twig snapped behind her. She spun around, heart lurching. Nothing, just trees, their trunks dark and unmoving. "Relax, Sarah," she muttered, forcing a laugh. "It's just the woods." But the feeling of being watched clung to her, heavy and insistent. She hurried on, eager to rejoin the main trail, but the path twisted strangely, looping in ways her map didn't show. Panic flickered. Had she gone wrong? She was too experienced for this, yet the forest felt foreign, hostile. Another snap, sharper, closer. She whirled, and for a heartbeat, she saw it. A shadow darting between the pines, too tall, too upright to be an animal. "Hello," she called, her voice trembling. "Who's there?" Silence answered, thick and suffocating. She ran, branches clawing at her, tearing her sleeves. The path blurred beneath her feet as she burst into a clearing and froze. A figure stood there, tall and shrouded in darkness, its edges indistinct but its presence undeniable. Her blood turned to ice. "Who are you?" she whispered. It didn't move, didn't speak, just stared with unseen eyes that pierced her soul. Then it raised an arm, pointing deeper into the woods. She glanced that way, and when she looked back, it was gone, vanished like a ghost. Her mind screamed run, but her legs shook, rooted to the spot. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. She fumbled for her water, drank deeply, trying to calm her racing heart. But the forest pressed in, the air thick with dread. She stumbled back toward the trail, or what she thought was the trail, but it twisted endlessly, a maze with no exit. The sun sank lower, shadows stretching like claws across the ground. Her watch read 4 p.m., yet the light felt wrong, dimming too fast. Then she heard it, a low, guttural growl, rippling through the trees. She froze, every nerve screaming. The growl came again, closer, joined by the crunch of leaves. Something was out there, stalking her. Her paralysis snapped, and she bolted, crashing through the underbrush. Thorns ripped her skin, blood trickling down her arms, but she didn't stop. The growls grew louder, wet and ragged, right behind her. She glanced back and screamed. It was a creature, a nightmare made flesh. Its body was humanoid but grotesque, pale skin stretched over sinewy muscle, mottled with dark patches. Its eyes glowed yellow, feral and unblinking, and its mouth gaped, lined with jagged, blood-stained teeth. Its hands, God, its hands, were clawed, dripping with something black and thick. Her foot snagged a root, and she fell hard, pain shooting through her ankle. She scrambled up, but the creature was on her, its shadow swallowing the light. She could smell it, decay, blood, death, and feel its heat, suffocatingly close. "Please," she sobbed, tears blurring her vision. "Don't." It tilted its head, studying her, then lunged. Claws tore into her side, fire exploding through her body. She screamed as it dragged her across the forest floor, her nails clawing uselessly at the dirt. Pain overwhelmed her, her vision fading to red and black. Her last thought was of Jen, waiting, oblivious, as the darkness swallowed her whole. Sarah didn't come home that night. Jen paced their apartment, phone in hand, her worry hardening into fear. By midnight, she called the park rangers, voice breaking. "She's never late. Something's happened. Please, find her." The rangers mobilized quickly. Sarah was no novice. Her disappearance on a familiar trail was alarming. They assembled a search party, rangers, volunteers, tracking dogs, and descended on the mist trail as darkness cloaked the park. Flashlights sliced through the mist, voices shouting Sarah's name into the void. The dogs sniffed, but the scent was weak, muddled by the damp air. Hours bled into dawn, and a volunteer spotted it, a backpack, torn and caked in mud, lying off the trail. It was Sarah's, her initials embroidered on the flap. Inside, her gear was intact, but her camera was gone. Nearby, a blood-soaked scrap of jacket dangled from a bush, the fabric stiff and dark. The rangers' faces tightened. This wasn't a rescue anymore. They fanned out, the dogs leading them into the dense forest. Blood stained the leaves, pooled in the dirt, but there was no body, just a trail of violence that ended abruptly. Helicopters joined the effort at first light, their hum a grim underscore to the ground search. The valley echoed with Sarah's name, but the forest stayed mute, its secrets locked tight. Jen arrived at the ranger station, eyes swollen from tears. They showed her the backpack and jacket, and she crumpled, sobbing. "That's hers. What happened? Where is she?" The rangers had no answers, only evidence of a brutal end. Still, they pressed on, driven by duty and fading hope. Weeks passed, the story exploding in the media, the Yosemite vanishing, a mystery that gripped the nation. Theories swirled: bear attack, serial killer, accident. Sarah's family offered a reward, but leads dried up. The park emptied, its beauty tainted by fear. Then, a hiker found her camera, buried in the dirt a mile from the backpack. The memory card survived, and the photos chilled the rangers to the bone. Most were typical: flowers, waterfalls, Sarah smiling at the summit, but the last was a nightmare. A blurry shot of the forest, and in the background, a figure, tall, humanoid, with glowing eyes and limbs too long, too twisted. It was no trick of the light. It was real, and it had been there with her. The image ignited the investigation. Experts debated its authenticity, but Sarah's earlier photos, shadows creeping closer, the forest growing darker, backed it up. Something had hunted her, something unnatural. As hope faded, whispers spread among the park's locals. They spoke of a legend, an old tale of a creature born from sorrow and rage. The Miwok tribe, who once thrived in the valley, had faced annihilation when settlers arrived, bringing plague and ruin. In their dying days, a shaman cursed the land, summoning a guardian, a being of shadow and hunger, a wendigo, to avenge their loss. It roamed the woods, they said, taking those who trespassed too far. Sarah's case revived the story. Strange reports surfaced: hikers seeing tall figures in the dusk, campers hearing growls no animal could make. Most had been dismissed, but now they felt like warnings. Dr. Elias Monroe, a historian, dug into the park's past and found chilling parallels. Disappearances from the 1800s, hikers lost with no trace, and tales of a beast stalking the wilds. He shared his research with the rangers, pleading with them to consider the impossible. They resisted. Science didn't bend to ghost stories, but doubt gnawed at them as the trail went cold. Jen, meanwhile, became a force of nature. She organized searches, hounded authorities, and turned to the fringe, psychics, paranormal experts. One, Mara, felt a dark energy in the park, a malice that thrived on fear. She led Jen to the camera's discovery site and performed a ritual, chanting as the air chilled and a wail rose from the trees. Jen saw a shadow flicker, then vanish, her skin crawling with certainty. Sarah's fate wasn't natural. Months later, the official search dwindled, but Jen refused to quit. She moved to a cabin near Yosemite, her life consumed by the quest for truth. One autumn day, hiking the mist trail yet again, she found a journal under a pile of leaves. Its pages, brittle and stained, belonged to Thomas Harding, a prospector from 1853. He wrote of a creature, eyes like fire, claws like knives, that hunted him to a cave filled with bones, his final refuge before he vanished. Jen's pulse raced. This was it. A clue, a map to answers. She pored over old charts, pinpointing a remote ravine. With a pack and GPS, she trekked alone, the forest growing darker, heavier, as she neared her goal. Eyes seemed to follow her, unseen but palpable. She found the cave, a slit in the rock, barely visible. Inside, the air reeked of rot, the walls slick and cold. Her flashlight revealed a chamber of horrors. Bones everywhere, human and animal, mingled with tattered cloth. She saw Sarah's jacket, a silver locket beside it, Sarah's locket, with their photo inside. Jen wept, the truth crashing down. Sarah was dead, taken by this place. A growl rumbled through the cave. She spun, her light catching glowing eyes in the dark. The creature emerged, massive, grotesque, a mirror of Harding's nightmare. Jen backed away, trapped, but it stopped, howled mournfully, and retreated, as if bound by some unseen force. She fled, collapsing outside, torn between relief and grief. She told the authorities, but they found the cave empty, the bones gone, the forest reclaiming its secrets. Jen left Yosemite, warning others of its hidden terror, a price paid in blood for its beauty. Story 2. Great Smoky Mountains, The Loss of Michael Thompson. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park stretched endlessly before the Thompson family as they wound their way up the twisting roads from Knoxville, Tennessee. It was August, and the peaks shimmered with a hazy blue veil, a sight that promised serenity and escape. Mark Thompson, a wiry man in his late 30s with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles whitening as he stole glances at his wife, Lisa, in the passenger seat. She was radiant, her auburn hair catching the sunlight, her green eyes sparkling with anticipation. In the back seat, their 8-year-old son, Michael, bounced with restless energy, his nose pressed against the window, fogging the glass with every excited breath. "Dad, are there bears out there?" Michael asked, his voice a high-pitched chirp. His small hands clutched a stuffed bear named Mr. Paws, its fur worn thin from years of love. "Plenty," Mark replied with a grin, meeting his son's wide eyes in the rearview mirror. "But don't worry, buddy. They're more scared of us than we are of them." Lisa chuckled, reaching back to ruffle Michael's sandy hair. "Let's hope so. This trip is about fun, not bear wrestling." The plan had been months in the making, a week-long camping adventure in Cades Cove, a verdant valley cradled by the Smokies' ancient peaks. For Mark, it was a chance to trade the monotony of his accounting job for the freedom of the wilderness. For Lisa, a schoolteacher weary of grading papers, it was a break from routine. And for Michael, it was a grand adventure, a chance to explore a world he'd only seen in books. They arrived at their campsite as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Towering oaks and maples loomed over the clearing, their leaves rustling in a gentle breeze that carried the scent of pine and damp earth. Mark set to work pitching the tent, his movements practiced and precise, while Lisa unpacked the cooler, humming softly. Michael darted around the site, chasing fireflies that flickered like tiny stars in the gloaming. That night, they gathered around a crackling campfire, the flames licking at the darkness. Hot dogs sizzled on sticks, and marshmallows melted into gooey perfection. Michael, his face sticky with sugar, begged for a story. Mark leaned forward, the firelight casting shadows across his face, and began a tale of a hiker lost in the Smokies, a man who ignored the trails, wandered too deep, and vanished into the fog, his cries swallowed by the trees. "Mark," Lisa scolded, swatting his arm. "You'll give him nightmares." But Michael's eyes gleamed with delight. "Tell me more, Dad. Did they ever find him?" "Nope," Mark said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Some say he's still out there, wandering, calling for help that never comes." Lisa rolled her eyes, but a shiver ran down her spine as the forest seemed to close in around them. The night deepened, and they crawled into their tent, the symphony of crickets and distant owl hoots lulling them into a fragile sleep. The Smokies felt alive, its heartbeat pulsing through the ground beneath them, a timeless, untamed force. Around midnight, the air shifted. The crickets fell silent, their chorus replaced by a low, guttural rumble that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Mark stirred, his brow furrowing in half-sleep, dismissing it as a trick of his mind. Lisa's fingers tightened on his arm, her breath shallow. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's nothing," Mark mumbled, too tired to care. "Just the wind." But it wasn't the wind. A shadow loomed outside the tent, massive and silent, its edges blurring into the blackness. The fabric quivered as if touched by invisible fingers, and a stench, rotting meat and wet soil, seeped through the nylon. Michael whimpered once, a faint, pitiful sound, before the night claimed him. The rustle of leaves was the only farewell as the forest took him away. Lisa woke to a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Her hand brushed Michael's sleeping bag, expecting the familiar warmth of her son, but found only cold, crumpled fabric. Her heart lurched as she sat up, shaking Mark awake. "Michael's gone," she cried, her voice cracking into a scream. Mark bolted upright, his eyes bleary but sharpening with panic. They tore through the tent, flashlights slashing wildly through the dark. Michael's shoes sat by the entrance, laces tied, untouched. Mr. Paws lay abandoned on his pillow, its black button eyes staring blankly. They stumbled outside, their bare feet sinking into the dewy grass, shouting his name into the gray dawn. "Michael! Michael!" The words ricocheted off the misty peaks, unanswered. The campground was a ghost town, the other families still cocooned in sleep. Mark pounded on the ranger station door until Ranger Tom Harris emerged, his weathered face creasing with concern. A man in his 50s, Harris had seen his share of lost kids, usually wanderers found shivering under a tree by noon. But the Thompsons' desperation was electric, contagious. "We'll find him," Harris said, his gravelly voice steady, though his eyes flickered with unease. He radioed for backup, and within an hour, the search was underway. Rangers in khaki uniforms, volunteers in bright vests, and a pack of bloodhounds swarmed Cades Cove, their shouts piercing the stillness. Michael's name became a mantra, a plea swallowed by the vastness of the park. The dogs caught a scent near the campsite, their noses twitching as they led the group through thick underbrush and across a trickling stream. A mile out, the trail stopped at a flat rock jutting from the water's edge. There, folded with an unnatural precision that turned Lisa's stomach, were Michael's clothes. His blue t-shirt with the dinosaur print, his khaki shorts, his white socks, all arranged as if he'd carefully undressed and stepped away. The muddy banks bore no footprints, no scuff marks, no sign of a struggle. Just his belongings, pristine and mocking. Lisa dropped to her knees, clutching the shirt, its faint scent of laundry detergent and Michael's sweat breaking her. "Where is he?" she wailed, her voice raw. Mark stood rigid, his mind spinning. A child didn't vanish like this, clothes folded, shoes left behind. It defied reason. Harris crouched beside the rock, his jaw tight. "This isn't right," he muttered, more to himself than to them. He radioed for helicopters and more dogs, his tone clipped. The search wasn't for a lost boy anymore. It was for something else, something unknown. By midday, the search was a frantic machine. Hundreds of boots trampling the trails, rotors chopping the sky, dogs baying into the wind. Yet the forest yielded nothing beyond the clothes. Lisa clung to the stream side, her fingers digging into the mud as if she could pull Michael back from wherever he'd gone. Mark paced, his fists clenched, his rational mind warring with a growing dread. Then a camper approached, a wiry man in his 30s named Greg, his face ashen. "I saw something last night," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thought it was a bear, but it wasn't. Too tall, too strange. It was standing just outside your tent, in the shadows past the fire. Watching." Mark rounded on him, fury flaring. "Why didn't you say anything?" Greg flinched. "I thought I was dreaming. Looked again, and it was gone. But I swear it was there." Harris's eyes narrowed. He'd heard the tales, ranger gossip about a thing in the Smokies, a presence older than the park itself. Most called it nonsense, campfire fodder. But Greg's terror was palpable, and Michael's absence gave the story claws. The search pressed on, the sun sinking into a blood-red dusk. As night fell, the team regrouped near the campsite, their faces etched with exhaustion. Then it came, a growl, deep and guttural, rolling through the trees like thunder. The dogs whimpered, tails tucked, refusing to budge. Harris gripped his rifle, his knuckles white. What the hell was that? Through the fog, a shape emerged, tall, hunched, its silhouette jagged against the mist. Its eyes glowed red, twin embers in the dark, fixed on the group. It stood motionless at the clearing's edge, a nightmare given form. Mark lunged forward, his voice a roar. "Where's my son?" The thing didn't flinch. It turned, slow and deliberate, and vanished into the haze, leaving a silence so heavy it crushed the air from their lungs. The searchers stood paralyzed, the forest's gaze pressing down on them. Whatever had Michael was real, and it wasn't done. News of Michael's disappearance exploded, drawing reporters like vultures to Cade's Cove. Headlines screamed of tragedy and mystery, but no theory, kidnapping, bear attack, hypothermia, fit the facts. Lisa and Mark became ghosts of themselves, hollowed by grief and the relentless questions. Desperate, Lisa sought answers beyond the rangers. In a cluttered trailer near the park's edge, she found Ethel Grayson, an old woman with rheumy eyes and a voice like dry leaves. Ethel had lived beside the Smokies for 80 years, her family rooted in its soil. Over a chipped teacup, she spoke of the Watcher, a creature born from the mountain's pain, a spirit of vengeance that claimed those who trespassed too far. "It takes the young," Ethel rasped, her gnarled hands trembling. "Leaves their clothes to mark its territory. Been that way since my grand's time." Mark scoffed, but Lisa seized the tale. "What if it has Michael? Can we find him?" Ethel's gaze darkened. "If it took him, he's lost. But it leaves signs, claw marks, bones in circles. Follow him, and you might find its lair. Be warned, it don't like intruders." Defying Harris's warnings, Lisa and Mark plunged back into the woods, armed with flashlights and Ethel's cryptic map of old sightings. They found the first mark, a gash in a pine trunk, too high for any animal, too deep for a tool. Then another, a trail of scars leading them into a labyrinth of shadows. The path ended at a cave, its entrance veiled by vines, its air thick with rot. Bones littered the ground, deer, raccoon, and smaller ones that turned Lisa's stomach. Amid the carnage lay Michael's sneaker, its laces still tied, stained with mud. She collapsed, a scream tearing from her as she clutched it. Mark pulled her close, his own tears falling silently. The growl came again, closer, vibrating through the stone. From the cave's moss stepped the Watcher, its fur matted with gore, its limbs twisted, its eyes blazing with a hunger older than time. Claws gleamed in the moonlight, and its breath was a hiss of decay. They ran, the forest a blur of terror, the creature's snarls snapping at their heels. When they stumbled into the campground, it stopped at the trees, its gaze boring into them. Then, with a howl that carried a strange, mournful weight, it retreated into the dark. The rangers searched the cave at dawn, finding only damp stone, no bones, no shoe, no proof. The official report called Michael's death an accident, his body swept away by nature's indifference. Lisa and Mark's tale of the Watcher was dismissed as delusion, a coping mechanism for unbearable loss. They left the Smokies, their marriage fraying, their nights plagued by those red eyes. The park moved on, but whispers lingered. Hikers spoke of a figure in the fog, a growl on the wind. And sometimes, they'd find clothes, folded neatly, left as offerings, silent testaments to the Watcher's reign. Story 3. Great Smoky Mountains, The Loss of Michael Thompson. The Great Smoky Mountains rose like silent sentinels over the horizon as the Thompson family's battered SUV climbed the winding roads from Knoxville, Tennessee. It was late August, the air thick with humidity, and the peaks glowed with a misty blue sheen that promised both beauty and isolation. Mark Thompson, a lean man in his late 30s with a scruffy beard and tired eyes, kept his hands steady on the wheel, though his grip betrayed a quiet tension. Beside him, Lisa, his wife, leaned forward, her auburn hair spilling over her shoulders, her face alight with the thrill of escape. In the back seat, their 8-year-old son, Michael, fidgeted endlessly, his small frame vibrating with excitement as he clutched a tattered stuffed bear named Mr. Paws. "Dad, are there really bears out there?" Michael's voice cut through the hum of the engine, sharp and eager, his brown eyes wide as he peered out the window. Mark flashed a grin in the rearview mirror. "Oh yeah, tons of them. Black bears mostly. But they're shy, probably more scared of you than you are of them." Lisa laughed, turning to tousle Michael's messy hair. "Let's hope they stay that way. This trip is for hiking and s'mores, not bear fights." The idea had sparked months ago, a week-long camping trip in Cades Cove, a lush valley nestled within the Smokies' rugged embrace. For Mark, it was a break from the soul-crushing grind of his accounting job, a chance to breathe air that didn't smell of toner and stale coffee. For Lisa, a third-grade teacher worn thin by endless lesson plans, it was freedom. And for Michael, it was a living storybook, a wild playground ripped from the pages of his favorite adventure tales. They reached their campsite as dusk settled, the sky bruising purple and gold. Ancient trees, oaks, hickories, and pines, towered over the clearing, their branches swaying in a breeze that carried whispers of moss and earth. Mark unpacked their gear with mechanical efficiency, hammering tent stakes into the soft ground, while Lisa arranged their supplies, her soft humming blending with the rustle of leaves. Michael darted around, chasing the first flickers of fireflies, his laughter ringing like a bell in the stillness. That night, they huddled around a campfire, its flames dancing against the encroaching dark. The scent of roasting hot dogs and charred marshmallows filled the air as Michael, his cheeks smeared with chocolate, begged for a story. Mark leaned in, the firelight carving deep shadows across his face, and spun a tale of a hiker lost in the Smokies, a man who strayed from the path, swallowed by fog, his voice fading into the wind. "Mark, stop it," Lisa chided, swatting his shoulder. "You'll scare him." But Michael leaned closer, grinning. "No, Dad, keep going. What happened to him?" "They never found him," Mark whispered, his voice low and theatrical. "Some say he's still out there, stumbling through the trees, calling out in the dark." Lisa shivered despite the fire's warmth, pulling her sweater tighter. The forest seemed to tighten around them, its edges blurring into the night. They crawled into their tent, the sounds of crickets and distant owls weaving a fragile lullaby. The Smokies pulsed with life, a vast, breathing entity that cradled them and watched. At midnight, the world shifted. The cricket's song died abruptly, replaced by a deep, guttural rumble that vibrated through the ground. Mark stirred, half asleep, brushing it off as a dream. Lisa's grip tightened on his arm, her breath hitching. "Mark, what was that?" she hissed. "Just the wind," he mumbled, eyes still closed. But it wasn't the wind. A shadow loomed beyond the tent, impossibly large, its outline jagged and wrong. The air thickened with a stench, rancid meat, wet fur, decay, that clawed its way through the fabric. Michael whimpered, a soft, broken sound, before the rustle of leaves swallowed him whole. The night took him, leaving only silence in its wake. Lisa woke to a coldness that seeped into her bones. Her hand reached for Michael, expecting the familiar rise and fall of his chest, but met only an empty sleeping bag, its fabric crumpled and lifeless. Panic surged as she shook Mark awake. He's gone. Michael's gone. Her scream shattered the morning stillness. Mark scrambled up, his heart pounding as he fumbled for a flashlight. They tore through the tent, beams of light slashing across the small space. Michael's sneakers sat by the flap, laces neatly tied. Mr. Paws lay abandoned on his pillow, its threadbare fur glinting faintly in the glow. They stumbled outside, barefoot and frantic, their cries, "Michael! Michael!" echoing into the mist-shrouded trees, unanswered. The campground was eerily quiet, other families still lost in sleep. Mark sprinted to the ranger station, hammering on the door until Ranger Tom Harris appeared, his grizzled face tightening with alarm. Harris, a veteran of the Smokies with decades of search and rescue under his belt, took one look at their wild eyes and grabbed his radio. "We'll find him," he said, his voice a steady anchor. "Kids wander off sometimes. We'll have him back by lunch." Within an hour, Cades Cove buzzed with activity. Rangers, volunteers, and a team of bloodhounds fanned out across the valley, their shouts cutting through the fog. Michael's name became a desperate chant, reverberating off the peaks. The dogs picked up a scent near the tent, their noses low as they tugged their handlers through brambles and over a shallow creek. A mile out, the trail ended at a slab of granite by the water's edge. There, folded with a precision that turned Lisa's stomach, were Michael's clothes, his red hoodie, his cargo shorts, his socks, arranged as if he'd paused to shed them before vanishing. The muddy bank showed no footprints, no signs of a scuffle, just his belongings, pristine and accusing. Lisa sank to her knees, clutching the hoodie, its scent of soap and little boy sweat ripping her apart. "Where is he?" she sobbed, her voice breaking into shards. Mark stood frozen, his mind reeling. This wasn't a lost child who'd wandered off. This was something else, something impossible. Harris knelt by the rock, his face hardening. "This ain't natural," he muttered, his fingers brushing the folded fabric. He called for helicopters and more dogs, his tone sharp with urgency. The search had shifted, from a missing boy to a mystery that gnawed at the edges of reason. By noon, the search was a chaotic symphony, boots crunching through underbrush, rotors slicing the sky, hounds baying into the void. Yet the forest gave nothing back. Lisa stayed by the creek, her hands caked with mud as she clawed at the earth, as if she could dig Michael out of the ground. Mark paced, his rationality crumbling under a tidal wave of fear. A camper approached them, a gaunt man named Greg with haunted eyes. "I saw something last night," he whispered, glancing nervously at the trees. "Thought it was a bear at first, but it wasn't right. Too big, too twisted. It was standing by your tent, just watching. I blinked and it was gone." Mark grabbed his collar, fury erupting. "Why the hell didn't you say something?" Greg shrank back. "I thought it was a nightmare. I didn't know." Harris cut in, his gaze piercing. "What did it look like?" "Taller than any bear I've seen," Greg stammered. "Eyes like fire. Smelled like death." Harris's jaw tightened. He'd heard whispers over the years, tales of a rogue bear, a monster warped by the mountain's shadows. Most rangers dismissed it as folklore, but Greg's fear was real, and Michael's absence lent it weight. As night fell, the search team regrouped near the campsite, their faces drawn with fatigue. Then it came, a roar, raw and primal, shaking the trees. The dogs cowered, tails between their legs, their whines piercing the air. Harris raised his rifle, scanning the fog. What in God's name? A shape lumbered into view, massive and grotesque, its fur matted with blood and filth. Its eyes burned red, glowing like coals in the mist, locked on the group. Its jaws hung open, revealing teeth jagged and stained, dripping with something dark. This was no ordinary bear. It was a nightmare, a beast driven mad by hunger and rage. Mark lunged forward, his voice a bellow. "Where's my son, you bastard?" The creature paused, its head tilting as if it understood. Then, with a guttural snarl, it turned and melted into the fog, leaving a silence that pressed down like a physical weight. The searchers stood rooted, the forest's breath hot on their necks. Whatever had Michael wasn't just an animal. It was a predator with a purpose. The story of Michael's vanishing spread like wildfire, drawing news crews and gawkers to Cade's Cove. Theories swirled. Abduction, accident, bear attack, but none explained the folded clothes or the absence of tracks. Lisa and Mark withered under the spotlight, their grief a raw wound prodded by every question. Desperate for answers, Lisa sought out old May, a recluse who lived in a sagging cabin near the park's boundary. May's eyes were clouded with age, her voice a rasp honed by years of solitude. Over a steaming mug of bitter tea, she spoke of the mad bear, a black bear twisted by some ancient sickness, its mind shattered, its hunger insatiable. "It don't just kill," May croaked. "It takes. Leaves their things behind to taunt us. Been that way since my daddy's daddy walked these hills." Mark scoffed, but Lisa clung to the words. "If it has Michael, can we find him?" May's lips thinned. "Maybe. It marks its ground, claw scars, piles of bones. Follow him, you might find its den. But it don't take kindly to trespassers." Against Harris's protests, Lisa and Mark ventured back into the woods, armed with flashlights and May's hand-drawn map of old sightings. They found the first sign, a tree trunk raked with claw marks, too high and too deep for any sane beast. The trail led them through tangled thickets and up rocky slopes, each gash a breadcrumb in a nightmare. The path ended at a cave, its mouth choked with brambles, its air heavy with the reek of rot. The ground was strewn with bones, animal and otherwise, cracked and gnawed. Among them lay Michael's sneaker, its sole crusted with dried blood. Lisa's legs buckled, a wail tearing from her throat as she clutched it. Mark pulled her against him, his own sobs silent but shaking. The roar came then, a sound that rattled their bones. From the cave stepped the mad bear, its fur patchy and scarred, its body unnaturally swollen, its eyes blazing with feral madness. Its claws were stained black, and its breath hissed with the stench of death. In its jaws hung a scrap of Michael's shirt, shredded and soaked red. They fled, branches clawing at their skin, the bear's snarls echoing behind them. It chased them to the campground's edge, stopping just short of the clearing, its gaze searing into their backs. Then, with a bellow that carried a chilling note of triumph, it turned and vanished into the trees. The rangers stormed the cave at first light, but found only damp rock, no bones, no sneaker, no trace of the bear. Michael's death was ruled a tragic accident, his body lost to the wild. Lisa and Mark's account of the mad bear was chalked up to trauma, a story too wild to believe. They left the Smokies broken, their lives unraveling in the aftermath. The park returned to its rhythms, but the whispers grew. Hikers reported sightings, a hulking shape in the mist, a roar on the wind. Clothes appeared on trails, folded with eerie care, left as trophies. Years later, a ranger found a hidden crevice near the cave, sealed by a landslide. Inside were the remains of dozens, bones gnawed to splinters, scraps of fabric, and, among them, a child's sneaker. Beside it lay a journal, its pages brittle, written by a trapper from decades past. He'd wounded a bear, driving it mad with pain and starvation, unleashing a terror that fed on vengeance. The final entry read, "It took my boy. It'll take more. God help us." The mad bear wasn't just a beast. It was a curse, born of human cruelty, its hunger eternal.